Dean Martin collapsed during his final interview with Johnny Carson. Not because of the drinking people whispered about backstage. Not from exhaustion, but from something that tore him apart from the inside. It was a secret he had carried for 25 years. The man known as the King of Cool, the performer who built an empire on never showing weakness, broke down on live television. The cameras kept rolling. The audience froze. The studio fell into complete silence. But what happened that night had nothing to do with Dean Martin's failing health, and it wasn't directly caused by the grief that had been slowly destroying him since the death of his son Dino in a plane crash. The real reason went much deeper. It led back to something Johnny Carson had done decades earlier, something Johnny himself didn't even remember, and that forgotten moment had once saved Dean Martin's life. May 13, 1988. Even before the cameras turned on, the tension inside the Tonight Show studio was unmistakable. 71-year-old Dean Martin, no longer the legend he once was, but a fading shadow of it, had insisted on one final appearance. His managers begged him to cancel. His family pleaded with him to stay home and rest. But Dean Martin had never listened to anyone, and he wasn't about to start now. He needed to say something, something that had been burning inside him for more than 2 decades, and he refused to leave this world without saying it out loud. No one in the studio, not the producers, not the audience, not even Johnny himself, knew that Dean hadn't come to tell nostalgic Hollywood stories. He had come to confess something he had never told another living soul, a secret tied to the darkest night of his life, and to a young television host who, without realizing it, had pulled him back from the edge. Why had Dean waited 25 years to tell the truth? And what had Johnny done that he couldn't remember? Stay with me, because what comes next changes how you see friendship forever. Behind the scenes at NBC that night, everything felt different. Marcus Webb, a stagehand who had worked on The Tonight Show for 19 years, had seen every major star walk through those doors. But he had never experienced such silence before an interview. Makeup artists stood frozen. Camera operators glanced nervously down the hallway. Everyone could feel it. Something important was about to happen. Johnny Carson sat alone in his dressing room. The door was locked. The lights were dim. An hour earlier, producer Fred Dordova had warned him, "Johnny, you need to be prepared. Dean isn't the same anymore. Since the tragedy, he barely eats, barely sleeps. This might be the last time America ever sees him." Johnny said nothing. He simply nodded slowly and asked to be left alone. The bond between Dean Martin and Johnny Carson went far beyond a typical Hollywood friendship. They had known each other for nearly 30 years. Dean had appeared on The Tonight Show more than 40 times, more than any other entertainer. But their relationship was never about ratings or publicity. Once, Dean told a reporter something Johnny never forgot. "Carson is the only guy in this fake town who never wanted anything from me. He just wanted me to be Dino." What the public never knew was that their friendship was born on a single night. A night in 1963. A night Johnny barely remembered. And a night Dean could never forget. 25 years later, Dean Martin was dying. Not from cancer. Not from any illness doctors could name. He was dying from grief. His son Dino, his pride, his joy, had been killed in a military training flight just 16 months earlier. And something inside Dean broke beyond repair. His daughter Gail begged him not to do the interview. "Dad, it's hard enough for you just to get through the day. Why put yourself through this?" Dean looked at her with empty eyes and said quietly, "Because I never told Johnny what he did for me. And if I die without telling him, I'll never forgive myself." When Dean Martin stepped onto the stage, America held its breath. The swagger was gone. The confidence that had defined him for 4 decades had vanished. He walked slowly, carefully, as if afraid the ground beneath him might collapse. His tuxedo hung loosely on his frame. His eyes, once filled with mischief, looked hollow. Then the band began to play Everybody Loves Somebody, and for just a moment, something changed. Dean straightened his shoulders, lifted his chin, and gave the audience that legendary wink. The applause that followed wasn't excitement. It wasn't celebration. It was love. It was goodbye. Johnny walked out from behind his desk, something he almost never did, and wrapped Dean in a long embrace. When they finally pulled apart, both men had tears in their eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen, Dean Martin," Johnny said, his voice breaking. "Welcome home." "There's nowhere else I'd rather be, John," Dean replied. For the first few minutes, everything felt almost normal. Johnny asked about the old days. Dean shared stories about Sinatra's temper, Sammy's pranks. The audience laughed, desperate to believe everything was okay. But everyone knew the truth. Every story was a gift. Every laugh was borrowed time. This was a dying man's final performance. Then Johnny asked the question. Looking back on your incredible career, what moment means the most to you? Dean's smile disappeared. His hand holding the glass began to shake. He slowly set it down and looked at Johnny in a way that made the entire studio lean forward. Johnny, Dean said softly, can I tell you something? Something I've never told anyone. Of course, Johnny replied, no longer as a host, but as a friend. I lost my son 16 months ago, my Dino. The studio fell completely silent. But that's not why I'm here tonight, Dean continued. I came to tell you why I didn't die 25 years ago. Dean spoke about the summer of 1963. About his marriage falling apart. About not seeing his children for weeks. About the studio canceling his contract and saying he was finished. He talked about the night he sat alone with a bottle of bourbon, having already made his decision. He wrote goodbye letters to his children, then decided to have one last drink at a place he once loved, the Formosa Café. You were there, Johnny, he said, sitting alone. A scared kid. They drank together for hours. Two men falling apart in silence. And at the end of the night, Dean said, you told me. If Dean Martin can walk into a room and make everyone believe everything is fine while his whole world is collapsing, then maybe I can survive this too. You're the reason I think I might make it. You had no idea I was planning to end my life, Dean continued. But you looked at me like I still mattered. I tore up those letters. I fought for my kids. I rebuilt my life. Because of you. You saved my life, Johnny. And you never even knew it. Johnny couldn't speak. For the first time in decades of live television, he was completely silent. Dean, he finally whispered. I remember now. I was ready to quit too. And you saved me that night. We saved each other, he said. That interview became one of the most unforgettable moments in television history. Thousands of people reached out for help in the weeks that followed. Because even the strongest people sometimes stand on the edge. And because a single conversation can save a life. Dean Martin died on Christmas morning in 1995, 7 years after that interview. Johnny Carson was one of the last people he spoke to. At Dean's funeral, Johnny said, "We walk around every day saving each other. And we don't even know it. And that is everything."